you have to make some offers, you have to make some sacrifices, but you also have to be bold about it and saying, I'm just going to do this. I want this because I want to be behind this steering wheel.
Hello everyone, my name is Gisa Netzeband and I'm Managing Director of DGMK, the German Society for Sustainable Energy Carriers, Mobility and Carbon Cycles. I have the honor and the pleasure to talk to women in the energy sector, with women who are deeply engaged, highly experienced and are active in shaping energy transition. I'm looking forward to inspiring stories, thoughts and ideas. Today I'm talking to Dr. Marit Brommer. She is Executive Director of IGA, the International Geothermal Association. She has a background in geoscience, huge experience in the oil and gas business, and is now driving geothermal energy globally. Hello, Marit.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Happy to have you. Marit, you study earth sciences. Why did you choose this direction? Did you want to go for a career in the E&P industry?
Wow. Okay. So this is going back some time. I must admit. Well, I studied geology because I really was interested in earth sciences. I was really intrigued with the differences in countries. I come originally from the Netherlands, which is, as probably your audience knows, a very low-lying country with hardly any mountains. We have one mountain, but we share it with the Germans and the Belgians. So, and I guess, you know, when you're traveling and when you're moving abroad and when you're seeing the world in its always different shapes and forms, my interest was really, understanding why there were so many differences in terms of countrysides and geographies and from coast to mountains, etc. So that triggered my interest. And when I studied geology, it wasn't for oil and gas at all. I was actually not interested in oil and gas. I was interested in coastal management and understanding flooding patterns and geography more than geology in the end. But I guess, you know, over time and slowly moving into the next steps of the career stage. In my case, after studying geology, I did also a PhD, and it was really at that PhD end when I got into the oil and gas sector much more than when I was studying geology in Amsterdam.
Well, thank you. I read that you also spent a year or two in consultancy. When was that and how was that?
So after my studies, indeed, I finished with my geology degree, my Master's of Science at the University of Amsterdam, and I moved into consultancy then for a couple of years, which was, it was by choice, but also things happen. If things happen, you get offered a nice position over the summer period or as an intern, and then you stay on, or you think, oh, this is actually quite interesting because I get to do a lot of work. I was really interested in sedimentary geology, and the consultancy I worked for had a huge lab and did some coring as well and some lab analysis, and that was all very exciting because rocks, in the end, you get your experience from looking at rocks and going on field trips, obviously, but also get the direct, let's say, experience with rocks in a core lab was pretty exciting. It sounds great if you look back at your CV and you think, oh, I made a deliberate choice there. But in the end, it was more like, you're slowly, gradually being asked maybe as well for certain directions and being asked for certain positions. So in my case, after my studies, it was really what just happened to come on my path. But whilst I was at the consultancy, I did make a deliberate choice to go into my PhD, because after the consultancy, I applied for a PhD position at Delft University, and I got that one. And I've never regretted that one, to make that deliberate choice to go into university back again and started to do my PhD.
I can hear a lot of passion for science in what you're saying. So did you envision a career in academia at this point in time when you went back to university?
That's a very good question. Yes and no, I guess. I think, people always say to me, oh, you must have had an interest in science, or at least to build an academic career if you do your PhD. And I can't deny that that's probably part of why and the argumentation behind going into a PhD, but it was not for me the sole reason. I think it's about having a choice, and it's also about having a project that you find really, really interesting and wanting to dedicate your time into. And I guess, you know, the beauty of the Dutch system, and I think it's still the same, is that you really are an employee of the university. You don't get that much money, that's not the point, but you do get a position for a couple of years. In when I did my PhD, it was for 4 years, and you're being offered, you know, a fantastic learning experience around a topic that you find interesting, with fantastic academic around you, in a university that I came to appreciate very much. This is Delft, and with a lot of technology experts around you, but also a worldwide network of geoscientists who can help you nurture your skill set. And I think it's also about appreciating that once you have done your PhD, you have a choice. And that is something that I feel very, and I already felt very strong about, that without a PhD, you probably won't ever get a teaching position or professorship, you know, at the university. With a PhD, though, you have a choice, because maybe after building your industry track record, you can move back to university. So it was more about strategic choosing here than yes or no wanting to have an academic career.
Great. And then you chose to enter the oil and gas industry.
I know, that's when it all went the other way. Yeah. So I guess my personality is probably also like that. I really enjoyed my PhD years, and I had some fantastic people around me, both, you know, as a PhD student with the other PhD students and the postdocs, but also, you know, your professors and the academic staff that I got to know both within the Netherlands but also beyond, in that fantastic network that I was a part of. Really appreciated it, really did. Writing papers and you know, constantly having to write proposals for new projects. I thought, oh my goodness, that's not my strength. It is not. I mean, it took me some very long hours to produce a few articles that could then be collected and called a PhD thesis. And I thought to myself, is this what I want to do for the foreseeable future, or do I want to do something else? And I guess it's personality as well. So the writing part is a skill set that you probably can acquire more and more. When you do it more, you become better at it, and this and that and the other. But the personality side of me is I like to do practical stuff. I'm really interested in projects. I'm really interested to see something through, you know, starting something but also finishing something. And I think the beauty of the oil and gas industry, and especially when you're then offered a position as a starter, it offers you a worldwide experience immediately in a couple of projects that you can call your own, and then you're working with some talented staff around you, and you have the opportunity to travel, which also, as a geologist, I think we all share that sort of passion. We like to travel and explore and see different parts of the world, and I guess that's the offer that an oil and gas industry then gives you. And it was very tempting, but also it suited me better as the person that I am.
So I hear that the international context and the ability to choose for yourself is the bracket that holds it together. That is the overlying thought.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that also brings the best out of you as a human being when you're able to do what you're good at, combined with what you want to do. It gives you purpose, but also the joy. And I think the best thing that you can have at work, whatever it is that you do, you must be happy with what you do.
True. I read that you've been working as a well site geologist, which is a very demanding job. In terms of working hours, but also responsibility. But you also always see the direct result of your action or a decision you take. Do you sometimes miss that, this direct link of a decision and the result?
For sure. And it took a long time especially in the job that I currently hold, for which I'm very grateful. And I think it is absolutely fantastic, what I do right now. But you're spot on. I mean, when you're a practical person, but also when the first, let's say, building block of your career, especially after PhD, which is still quite theoretical, although you've finished maybe the PhD and you have finished something, which is really nice, still it's very theoretical. You have a problem, you have a solution for it, you study the data, why that's the best solution for something, and then you're finished. But the first building block of my industry life career was indeed very practical. I love that. You go into a well site, or in my case I also did loads of offshore work, and very exciting, of course, to work offshore, but also very hands-on, very practical. You have a problem, you deal with it right now, or you have to do an analysis, you do it right now. And you see immediate results. And I love that. I really did enjoy that. And I guess the real difficult part is when you transition into a new world, but also a new role, is when you don't have that direct result in front of you. For me right now, I see a result, but it comes later, or it doesn't come at all, or it comes via a variety of other stakeholders who say yes to a certain direction, or it's more, let's say, a vision that you're now trying to live than seeing an actual project or seeing an actual, let's say, concrete result out of your actions that makes me tick. And that's very different. Spot on. Very nice that you say that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. So you still choose to go for this job, for the position you now have, and to leave the oil and gas business for geothermal. So what drove this decision, and how did family and friends react?
Okay. So that's a couple of questions in one, indeed. So I think, as always, there is a bit of a personal reflection in whatever decision you do. And it's a combination between what is the situation at this stage, your family situation, but also the world, as in what is the world looking like that you're the context of your decision-making process. So to go back to my decision of leaving the oil and gas industry behind, and part of it is to do, after 10 years, so I've been working at two major companies, Total and Shell. And both have given me fantastic experiences and learnings and insights, and really have helped me shape my profile, but also my skill set. And you fill your little bag on your back, your backpack, basically, with all kinds of things during that industry block that I call my track record when it comes down to oil and gas. And at a certain point, you want to you reflect on that, and you think, do I want to carry on? Do I want to build on that building block with maybe a new position within Shell, or maybe want to move to another country? And I guess for me, I decided not to do all of that within the oil and gas industry, but really wanting to transition to, first of all, out of the commercial sector and into a non-profit. That was a very deliberate choice. But also to be more into renewables, and not renewables because I thought, I have to work in renewables because oil and gas is a dying discipline. No, but more renewables is exciting. It's upcoming, it's emerging. There's this vision that, we want to get something done in 30 years, as in 2050. And oil and gas will stay here. I mean, I'm convinced that we will see a lot of gas for sure, and oil maybe will probably go down a little bit. But we will see fossil fuels still, of course, active. So for me, it has never been a choice of, I'm working in a dying discipline, I want to go out. No, I thought, I have something to offer, at least this is what I think, in the renewables, specifically geoscience-based renewables. And that's all with geothermal, storage, CCS, anything that sort of needs the earth in order to store it or produce it. That's where we as geoscientists really sit and fit very well. But it's not very visible. Wind is very visible, solar is very visible. All the rest is a bit like, what's renewable there? And I thought, if I can be a little, like a bridge, or if I can be like, the one who's creating synergy between the industries that I want to work in, both the renewable sector and the oil and gas sector, coming from my background. Maybe that could be quite interesting to do that in a more like a leadership role within a non-profit association, such as the IGA, because then you have the ability to make the best of your world. And that is, in my case, communication and, visibility combined with technical knowledge. And so I have not regretted that decision at all. Family and friends. Yeah, interesting. I think in the beginning, a lot of people said to me, why are you leaving a high paid position? Why? Why are you leaving a well-known company, an awesome brand? I mean, everything that you hear when you're leaving one of the best, in their opinions, at least one of the best companies in the world. And yeah, that's a good question. Why? And I think that's intrinsic sort of internal motivation. So that's one. Some of my friends and within my network, applauded you as in, wow, you're making a choice. I like that, and good for you. And we will cheer you on in your journey. So I guess it was really mixed, and I think ultimately it drives down to you as a person. You're making the choice. You're driving your own future. That's it. I mean, anyone can say something negative or positive, and it's all lovely. But at the end of the day, you are behind the steering wheel. You determine your own future, and that needs to make you feel happy. But it needs to fit who you are as a human being. So for me, it was the best choice that I've made.
Definitely sounds like it. You were saying that with your oil and gas background and your subsurface experience, you could make a big difference in geothermal. Do you think it needs more oil and gas people doing that switch and going into geothermal?
Well, yes, and yes. And I think what I also would like to see is that, first of all, there need to be more projects. Let's be very honest, we're still very small as geothermal. I mean, we drill a couple of 100 wells each year, as opposed to oil and gas, which drills the thousands. And, if you look at our entire knowledge base when it comes down to geothermal subsurface, it consists of a couple of, maybe 10,000 wells that we know, that we actually have data on, or that we can do something interesting on. And if you look at oil and gas, it's in the millions. I mean, millions of wells have been drilled for oil and gas. So first of all, I mean, the size of the price, so to speak, for any type of geoscience work going from oil and gas to geothermal is very much, detained, because it is so we don't have enough projects to really bite yourself into. So we need to grow geothermal. And how are we going to grow geothermal if oil and gas is not, ready to scale up the activities around subsurface for both geothermal, but also for storage and CCS and all these things that we're good at, as geoscientists. So I think we need geologists and we need subsurface professionals. We need good asset managers. We need production geologists. We need geophysicists. We need reservoir engineers. We need all that, but we also need the projects. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg here, is that you want these people to transition, but actually what you really want is that all the majors and the nationals and, let's say, the small oil and gas companies are taking geothermal on board and are actively exploring and producing geothermal assets. That's what you really want to see happening.
So is this part of your goal within IGA to form strategic partnerships also with the oil and gas industry?
Yes. So we have many, let's say, pillars that we're leaning on when it comes down to the IGA worldwide, and it is very different from region to region or country to country. So it is not that everywhere in the world that I see that there is a strategic partnership in need of an oil and gas, let's say, approach. I mean, look, the volcanic regions of this world, let's call that the ring of fire, so to speak. We have expert knowledge there. If we really want to grow our portfolios around the volcanics, yeah, we can learn from oil and gas, but we actually, we know pretty well how it functions. You can argue whether that's the best growth strategy to only focus on the green volcanoes, so to speak, but at least, that part of the subsurface we actually know pretty well. Where we grow and want to create strategic partnerships around are the sedimentary basins, are the basins where oil and gas would have vast knowledge and maybe is in need to transition and divest their traditional portfolios into a more, let's say, diverse portfolio, including geothermal. I also see a part of geothermal around EGS, so the enhanced geothermal systems, where we have to stimulate the reservoirs. We do not use the F word, we stimulate our reservoirs in order to produce more fluids from it. That's another area where I see a lot of strategic partnerships evolving, but also maturing around oil and gas and geothermal. And the third category is really the technology. I mean, we see that the traditional geothermal or the conventional geothermal, where we have an injector and a producer and they work in synergy together, it works really well in certain settings. In other settings, it doesn't work too good. And there is a lot of startups and now innovation around a thing called technology called closed loop, where we have the pipes interconnected, and hence we don't need to have both systems in order to find, let's say, the right producing well and the right injector well. And that's oil and gas stack. That really is, superior drilling technology coming from the oil and gas sector, which is really exciting. And yes, as IGA, we're fully supporting that and really want to see that through and help wherever that's possible. And equally, we're driving partnerships around policies and around regulations and about, climate advocacy and clean tech. And so there is a range of partnerships that are needed in order to get geothermal in whatever shape and form, but to get geothermal on the roadmap to a net zero future.
Wow. One step back to the E&P industry. So comparing the two working environments in oil and gas and in geothermal, what would you say is the difference? And especially in terms of diversity or gender diversity, which one is the more welcoming?
Ooh, that's a leading question. So, okay, I have a disclaimer here, and that is, when I moved to geothermal, I did not move to a geothermal, let's say, company. I moved to non-profits, leadership position in the form of being, at the forefront of an association. So if you ask me about, the internal dynamics of a given geothermal company, it is not really, I have never really worked in a geothermal company. So that's my disclaimer in terms of answering the question when it comes down to diversity. I think, when it comes down to subsurface work, let's be honest. We are exploring for and producing fluids from a reservoir. And for that, you need the skills which are very similar in oil and gas as in geothermal. I see no difference there. We have different data. We have less data in geothermal. Probably you need to do everything at once as a geothermal, let's say, geologist or as a geothermal reservoir engineer. You have to be a geologist as well, because you have to do everything, because budgets are so extremely limited and there is no money basically to really dive into the ins and outs of reservoir modeling and history matching and all these things that we're used to in a typical E&P company. But if you really strip it down to the core business of producing and, let's say, optimizing fluids from a reservoir, it's very similar, very similar. In terms of diversity, look, I think I have met some outstanding leaders, both, let's say, in oil and gas and in geothermal, both male and female, really advocating for equality, okay, really advocating for equality. The fact of the matter is still that within oil and gas, I don't know the numbers really that well anymore, but when I was at Shell, I think on average, the peer group, when you start, the young professional peer group until the age of, let's call it 30, it's about 50-50 male, female. But as soon as you're over that 30 years cohort, and you go into mid and then into senior, it drops down to 10%, 5%, and then at the top, there's hardly anyone left. And that's very similar in geothermal. There are hardly any women leaders. There are some exceptional ones, of course, but there are hardly any female leaders, although there are, of course, some startups with some female hats, which is really great to see, or some champions like Anne Robertson, for instance, at Schlumberger, Geothermax. I mean, those are strong women who have been involved in the geothermal industry for a very long time. But equally, when you see, the percentage female, male at that sort of junior ranks, it's very similar, around 40-50%. But as soon as you go up, it drops down. And that's a dynamic that apparently is everywhere within the energy industry. Because, in my role, I also have the fortune to speak at events where the other renewable associations are also present. For instance, wind or solar or hydropower. And Geza, I'm always the only female industry association leadership. I'm always the only one, which is really interesting, because why can't we find another, executive director of a large, industry association? Is that really hard for wind or for solar or for hydropower or for biomass? Apparently it is. So it's not just oil and gas or geothermal. This is a challenge that the entire industry energy industry faces.
I admit this comes as a surprise. I always assumed it would be better, different in the renewables.
I think if you look, and this is so interesting about the energy business in general, I think when you look in any given energy sector, you will find probably 50-50 or 40-60 sort of percentages male, female at the junior ranks. The input is not an issue. It never has been a real issue. Of course, maybe in last century, numbers of engineering studies showed that there were more males studying engineering or in the STEM field than females, sure. But those times are over. I mean, if you really look at the leading universities worldwide, it's about 50-50. It's about maybe 40-60. And in certain cases, in certain countries, maybe it's 30-70 when it comes down to female-male ratio, when it comes down to studying in a STEM field. But if you really look at the career progression, that's very similar throughout the energy business. It stops at a certain point. There is no real progression from starting up your career and seeing it through to a senior level of leadership. And that is a huge problem, and it's a huge waste of human capital, in my opinion.
Absolutely true. Was there a certain point or the tipping point for you when you decided to become the outspoken advocate of gender diversity that you are now, or was it more a gradual development?
Oh, look, a couple of things, and this is where I really want to commend Shell on. Shell put me on a leadership course when I was early 30s, okay, and I had my first child, so I became a mom, and I thought leadership course, oh, wow, exciting, and this and that, and I never felt different, or that I was being seen different as a female. I mean, not that I was completely oblivious about all of this, because you do see differences, and yeah, you become a mom and a parent, and you get these people telling you, "How are you going to stay working? How amazing!" I mean, but to me, that's all, let's say, noise. This is my world, this is my path, this is my future, I'm behind the steering wheel. That's my philosophy in life anyway. Yes, I can be a passenger, okay, in someone else's car when I just go somewhere. But if it's about my career, my life, I like to sit behind the steering wheel. So the noise about, people commenting on whether you have to work or not, or how are you going to do that with your baby, that to me is a chit-chat. It's important, though. I don't want to marginalize that, because the chit chat is still, it can put you down. Okay, it can put you down. But Shell put me on a leadership course, and really interesting. And I remember this because for the first time I realized that I am part of statistics. Okay, I was part of being statistics, and that is that only 1 out of probably 10 people in the room in that leadership course, female or females, would probably stay on after their second or third or whatever child. Meaning that if you made it until your 40th, if you made it until you're 40, you're still, having a position of trust, having a position, it doesn't matter how many hours you put to work. It's not about part-time versus full-time. It's about the commitment. It's about, staying engaged. It's about putting the hours in. It's about being able to balance everything. It's hard, okay? It's hard in that period. And it's not about being a mother or a parent. It's also about taking care of your parents at that age. It's about wanting to explore life maybe in a different dimension. It's about having a partner who maybe earns more, and then you have to negotiate that back home. Anyway, they told me that most women drop out between 30 and 40. And I thought, oh my God, I'm part of this statistic. I could be the one, the 9 out of the 10 who drop out by the end of the 40th. So it was for me a turning point that I really thought I can be part of statistic, but I can also be, that 1 in 10. Who do I want to be? And it is that conscious realization that it's about putting the hours in. Yeah, but it's about understanding that you have a role in life to play, which is bigger than just being an employee. Okay, we have to balance a lot, but men do as well. And men sometimes are more, let's say, driven about it because they want to have a career or they want to balance it all anyway because they have a lovely partner at home or whatever. But as a woman, you have to do that as well. You have to balance and you have to be, let's say, strong about it as well, because it doesn't come for free. You have to make some offers, you have to make some sacrifices, but you also have to be bold about it and saying, I'm just going to do this. I want this because I want to be behind this steering wheel.
Well, listen to those words, ladies. Marit, sorry, you radiate so much passion. Is there anything that can slow down your enthusiasm?
Oh, well, a lot, I guess. I'm not all the time as radiant and as energetic. Life can be hard. Okay, life is a challenge. It is easy for me to say I'm now 44 days. Okay, so I made it past the 40th. I made a conscious decision to leave Shell and take up a new role when I was at the end of my 30s, and yeah. Do I see that as an easy ride? No, it was not. It was very hard. It was very difficult. It took a lot of negotiation and time and also, partner and family, the children. I mean, the children were very young. I still remember when I went out traveling, when that was normal traveling, when traveling was normal pre-COVID, the children were crying when you put your suitcase back up again. And so it's not easy. I'm not saying that it's easy. It's easy to talk about this because I do believe it is good to be bold about it and to be absolutely adamant that it's important to balance your life, whatever that balance is, because I have no judgment either if you decide not to do it. But I think it's a shame if you leave, let's say, your working relationship behind, if you feel that you have not tried to negotiate. Because I do feel that a lot of women don't negotiate that well with their partners or at work or even sometimes with their families, because family is not easy. Yes? Sometimes my mom makes comments that you think, okay, take it, but I'm just going to continue doing my thing. So life is a constant battle. So yes, I'm slowed down as well. And yes, I don't have always that energy around me, but I try to make the most of it. And I also think it's important to show that constantly, that you can change the world if you start with yourself. And that to me is a very important point.
That would be a great final remarks, but I have 2 more questions to ask you.
Okay. Yeah.
So, what has been your biggest challenge so far?
Okay, well, I think the biggest challenge so far has been when the kids were young and I made this decision to leave a comfortable, in a way, a plannable job in a comfortable industry behind. Not only did that give, of course, some financial sort of, uncertainty, but also the challenge of finally understanding that I had the opportunity to do something that would really work well for me as an individual, as the one who's driving, and feeling that constant sort of conflict sometimes between having 2 young children that you also want to be part of. I want to be part of their journey as well. I'm their mother, I'm their parent, and my husband, of course, and also taking up some more time to be home and balance his work with, being the responsible parent who could be home when the kids went home. And I think that is not to be underestimated. And it has been for me a challenge, a huge challenge, and a constant look, in the mirror and pat yourself on the back and say, you're doing well. Okay. You're making conscious choices. It's about quality. It's not about the quantity that you put time, in being there for the children or being there for work. It's about quality. And that took a couple of years, I guess, to really feel assured as well that what you're doing is the right thing for me as an individual, and hence becoming a better mom and becoming a better parent and becoming a better, person to your husband, to your, family, friends, and work. But it was hard. So I think that was for me the biggest challenge. And yes, I think, there are nights or there are evenings that you think, will I be that statistic again? The 9 out of 10 who drops out before the 40th. So because it is hard, it is really hard at that time to sort of, stick in there and just do it and accept that life is not easy sometimes. So yeah, that was for me the hardest. And now it's so much easier, beyond 40, it's so much easier. So yes, yeah. Also the children are slightly older now, so that also helps.
Yes. So final question. What is your personal opinion? How long will it take for Europe to become climate neutral? Will we make it in time?
Oh, good one. Okay, so I'm an optimist, okay? My glass is half full. So otherwise I couldn't be doing the role that I currently am fulfilling. Absolutely, we will. We will. And not only because we say we will, but I believe in the power of the people. And I see a young generation, especially the teenagers and the early 20s who are faced with some difficult decision making when it comes down to, what they're going to study, all the way to what is the job that they want to have. And what I see more and more when I talk to this young generation is that sustainability and understanding how you want to live and work and travel, and also being confronted with this pandemic, is putting a huge insight into people's hearts and minds about climate change in general, but also how you want to live your life. And that's different, I guess, than when I was, teenager and early sort of in my early 20s, Not that I say that life was so much easier. I'm not looking back at my life, it's so easier then. But it was different because, travel was just upcoming, cheap flights here and there. It was normal to do that, normal to travel. And now people are far more conscious about CO2 emissions. They're really, the climate strikes and this and that and the other. It is a sign of the time that our youth is going to change the world. If I would only look at our political leadership right now, not just Europe, but everywhere, it's going to be a hard task to really look in our political leadership's eyes and honestly say, we're going to get this done. Because the political leadership line most of the time sits, in a couple of years, 4 years, maybe 8 years if you're in term for 8 years. But I think our youth are the ones who are going to take up the reins, who are going to drive this, who are going to be, the next CEOs and presidents and generals of the UNs and this and that and the other in the 30 years that we will see this through. And I think that's exciting. So the youth give me lots of hope. But also I'm convinced that coming back on the rational side of things, this is about financing. Okay, this is about understanding that we're moving out of the vested interest from the fossil fuel industry. And if I look at what the shareholders are doing, if I look at what the pension funds are doing, and if I look at where the money is going and where the money is to be made, it is in the new energy world. It's not in fossil fuels in 30 years' time. It is in the new energy world. And that new energy space is exciting. It is investable, it's bankable, and it is something that I feel very proud of, that we can achieve that together. So yes, we'll get this done. Europe will be climate neutral. It's probably not at the time space that we want to see it as in the coming next years, but by 2050, absolutely convinced.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this optimistic perspective and for your personal insights. Thanks again, Marit.
Keza, thank you, and also for having me, and that you're having this podcast. I think it's fantastic to see that through, and also your initiative is very welcome, because I do think it's important to keep on putting the spotlight on equality, whatever we do, wherever we are, whoever we work for, and what it is that we want to do. So thank you for that.
Again, thank you.